tell me how you first came here in Muskegon.
Well, I came here from Humanoak, Arkansas in 1921. We came to Muskegon by way of Memphis, Tennessee, and Chicago. At the time when I was in Chicago, the children were having rickets, and my mother, thought maybe I might have caught the rickets. And we moved, she decided to come to Muskegon. I had an uncle here, and an aunt, 2 aunts, and 3 uncles. We came here on a boat. That was, at the time they didn't have any buses. You either came here on a train or you came here on a boat. And the boat was SS Alabama.
And then after you came here, where did you first live?
We first lived with a family on Park Street. Right now it's a temple of a Muslim church.
All right, and how long did you stay there? And how old were you then?
I was 18 months old. We stayed there for about a month. Then we moved with my uncle on 8th Street, on the corner of 8th and Hovey. And from there we moved to Henry Street, the corner of Henry and Sherman. Then after that we moved to McEwer Street, which now is a 2600 block.
Is there any reason why you stayed in the Heights mainly?
Well, Heights was a new development, and
were there only African Americans there?
No, we weren't the only African Americans. There were several families. African American families were down on McEwer Street and Man Street, which is now the 2000 block. And the other development was on Mans and McEwer Street, which is the 2600 block.
Your number of memory is better than mine. Okay, then after that you say you went to, was it Henry Street?
Henry Street.
There. And how old were you then?
I was about 3 years old.
3 years old. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Good for you. And how did you play, and what was the atmosphere with children of that time?
Well, at that time you did your own thing. There were no playgrounds, nothing for kids to play with. The area from McEwer Street back toward Getty was no housings. It was all wooded area, no pavements, no sidewalks, and practically no housing.
Were there bars and things for people to go, or nightclubs or anything there?
There was a pool room, and I'm not sure. It was a club in Muskegon. I think it was down on the bottom of Jefferson Street. I'm not sure.
Was that the sepia? Or was that before the sepia?
That was before the sepia.
All right.
That was back in the 20s.
So what did, do you remember what the grown-ups did, or were you too young to remember that? I mean, what were black people doing at that time? I mean, do you remember what they did for entertainment, or?
There wasn't any entertainment. Excuse me. It was all just like a rural country, like on a farm. Houses was spar and in between. Only thing that you could do was entertain yourself. Visit families. There was nothing else to do.
Was the railroads around their tracks?
Yes, railroads. There was Pennsylvania Railroad, Pierre Marquette Railroad, and the Grand Trunk.
Was there any public transportation like buses and so on?
There was a streetcar running from up Sanford Street. That was only public transportation. If you didn't catch the streetcar, you'd have to walk to Muskegon.
Was Muskegon a bigger place than the Heights?
Yes.
And all the happenings were in Muskegon?
All the happenings were in Muskegon. Later years, back in the later 20s, the latter part of the early 30s, they had a club on the west side, on the corner of Hume and 8th Street.
This was the African American club?
African American club. It was run by Miss Scott. She had a tavern and she had a rooming house. And the tavern was the only thing that operated. Anything else, it was all speakeasy.
Oh yes, during the Prohibition time.
Right.
Do you remember if African Americans were involved in the speakeasy?
Practically everybody was involved in the speakeasy, but they just had rent parties.
Oh yeah.
They would throw a party on Saturday night. They have chitlins, homemade beer, homemade whiskey, and other items to eat. And that would be on a Saturday night. And that was called rent parties. People would make their rent. It was illegal to have whiskey, but bootlegging was at its height at that time. A friend of mine that I knew, I didn't know her, but she was with the family when we were in Arkansas. She used to give Friday night parties for the police department. They let her operate illegally because she catered to the police on a Friday night until she got busted by the feds, and she went to prison for 2 years.
For serving alcohol?
For serving alcohol. Her name was Amelia Weaver.
Now, let me ask you this. How much did they charge in these rent parties? Do you remember?
That I don't know. I was usually there at the time. My aunt, she was into it a big way. And one thing I recollect was she had a party. I was 3 years old. And she gave me some homemade whiskey. And some
At 3 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And gave me a cigarette. Well, she actually didn't do it. It was her boyfriend. And I smoked on the cigarette and I smoked on the cigar. And when I know anything, the last thing I knew, I was crawling under the bed, stone drunk.
You still remember that, huh? I guess that was quite an event. Okay, now, you remember about you starting school and going to school in high school?
I went to school. It was on three-room school on the corner of Hume and Jarman Street. First, second, and third grade. After leaving there, I went to Oak Grove, which is now Lindbergh School. And from there, I went to Central, Junior High, and then to high school.
Now, what year was that? You remember?
1925, when I started school.
Okay, what year, did you remember when Ruby Brown was at the high school when he played football?
Yes, he played football. He was the black man's hero. But nobody knows, actually the blacks didn't even know what a football was at that time. But all they know, he was a football player and he was our hero.
And he lived in the Heights then too, didn't he?
He lived in the Heights too. He lived on the corner of Jarman and Manahan.
Now, from what I can understand, that Ruby Brown was the first African-American graduate from the Heights High. Do you remember that?
I don't remember, but I remember him going to school at the Heights. Being small at that time, I didn't get around too much. I was limited where I could go.
But he was like a Joe Louis to us, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now, did you graduate from Heights High?
Yes.
Okay, you remember the year you graduated?
42.
42. All right, can you tell us something about your schooling at the Heights High? How the teachers treated you, how the students treated you?
Well, at that time, I didn't graduate until I was 20 years old. I had problems in school. When I first started at Porter School, I did okay, and I was good enough to have them skip the grade from second to third grade. Second to third grade. But then I don't know what happened. My mother thought they'd made a mistake, and she had them to transfer me back, and that sort of messed my mind up, you know, because I figured I should have went. And then I finally went back to Lindbergh School, like I say, what was Oak Grove at the time. I went there to the third grade. That's where I started having trouble. Before I went there, there was no problem. But when I got to Lindbergh, that's when I run into a lot of prejudice. I found out different names that were called, that I was called.
Can you tell me some of them? You remember any?
Nigger, pork chop, Sambo, watermelon, a lot of names. And most of the time I had to fight my way home, fight my way to school.
Were they all white teachers?
They were all white teachers.
And mainly white students?
Mainly white students. A lot of time when I'd be going to school, there was always 2 or 3 on the corner challenging me to fight. And a lot of times I would have to go to school early so I could make it to school.
Were any of the principals or teachers on your side?
1 or 2. They actually didn't know what was going on after school was off.
Did you have to run home?
Several times.
Yeah.
But after about the 4th grade, it changed. I came home a couple times. My mother wanted to know why I was so late coming home, and I told her that I had been fighting my way home. And she told me that if I ever come home and say that somebody jumped on me, that she would beat me again if I didn't beat them. So from then on, I was doing the challenging.
Did they better accept you then? Did the white students better?
Not really.
Nah?
No. Well, this went on through the all the time I was going to school. Some things that happened, and I really couldn't concentrate on school. And I really didn't keep up with my classes, because I tried to quit school from the 7th grade on through high school. I would skip school, never go to school, but my mother would make me go anyway. And but anyway, I just fell behind.
All right, what happened in high school? Did things change when you got to high school?
No.
You still had to fight?
I didn't do any. I never did any fighting in high school, but it was always a cloud.
You were different. And
yeah. And if you walked up to some that were talking, they were good friends, individually, but when they were together and you walked up to them, they would get silent or change the conversation, and then when you walk away, they would sort of giggle.
Now, when you graduated from high school, what did you do after that?
I went to Camel Wine Cannon.
Did you have any trouble getting a job there?
Yes.
What year was that? That was in
1942.
1942, okay.
Right.
That was before they brought in the big migration from the south?
Well, the migration started in 37. People were coming from Arkansas, mostly, getting jobs at Camels and Lakeys, because they were picking up in what they call at that time Roosevelt.
They had a mandate for them to manpower.
Yeah, they weren't actually in the war, but they were supporting the Allies.
Yes. Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was before we got into the war.
Right.
Do you remember anything about the hotbeds?
No, I wasn't here at the time of the hotbeds. I was in service.
Oh, okay. How long did you work from 42 at Camels?
Until 1977.
But you went to service in between?
Right.
What years did you go to the service?
42.
Oh, okay. Now tell me about your adventures at Camels. Tell me how they treated you. Tell me how the bosses treated you. Tell me how the other workers treated you, and the black and white workers.
Well, all the time that I was going to school, and before I come out of school, I would go around trying to get a job at Camel Wine Cannon. Well, matter of fact, I went to every place in Muskegon trying to get a job. But at that time, only place was hiring black was Camel Wine Cannon and Lakey and Clover. And
this was in 42.
42.
Okay.
And I went to Continental, Seal Power. I went to every place, and they wouldn't hire me. I remember one period of time I went to West Michigan Steel. I'd go down there every day because they were hiring. George Allen and another friend of mine and myself, we would go down there every day anticipating getting a job. They would hire everybody in the line except us. They said they didn't have any openings for us.
Did they tell you they didn't have any openings for black folks?
They did not black folks.
They just said us, huh?
Well, actually, they were hiring blacks only in the foundry department. And if it was in the foundry shaking out, there was no job for you. And I went there every day, excuse me, and I finally got a job at Campbell's. A friend of mine was going in service, going down to Tuskegee. And he went in at a time that they had to have somebody. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they had to put me on because there was nobody else there. And that's how I got hired.
What job did you do when you went on?
I worked in the coal room.
Okay.
Actually, the jobs that I was on was restricted. They really didn't hire blacks for the coal room. They hired about 7 blacks in the coal room, but they always hired them in the cleaning room and the foundry because that were all the hard jobs. I worked there until I went into service.
Was there a union there when you were hired?
No union.
Did they pay you the same thing that they paid the white workers, or do you know?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did they treat you different from the white workers in the coal room?
No. The workers didn't. Well, I never come in contact with the other people.
They didn't call you names or anything?
No. Well, a lot of the guys that worked there, I went to school with too, so there was no friction there.
A lot of the white persons you went to school with?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about other black workers? Did you talk to them during that time? Like the ones working in the foundry, the ones working in the cleaning room?
Well, I never come in contact with them. Because at the first time, when I started working there, I was going to school in the day and working at Campbell's at night.
Oh, you were working at 5 o'clock. That's the 5 o'clock time.
Right.
Oh. How old were you then?
I was 20 years old.
20 years old. You're doing both. All right. Now, did you get married during that time?
No, I didn't get married until 1951.
Okay. Now, tell me about the service. Now, you got drafted?
Drafted. I got drafted. I left here in December of 42. We left here on, well, first we went to sign up for examinations. Left here and went to Kalamazoo for examinations. We left here on a segregated bus. There were 2 buses, one for black, one for white, all going to the same place. And then when I got inducted into service, we went on trains. And they had separate cars for blacks and separate for white.
And this was in the north too, huh? Actually, this was right in the north. This wasn't in the south.
Right in the north. Went to Fort Custer. It was segregated there. And I left Fort Custer and went to Virginia. It is also segregated. Well, I didn't really go to town because everything was segregated in Washington, D.C. too. I stayed there for about 2 months, and I left there going to Fort Crook to a school, welding school, welding and blacksmith.
All right, now, why did you come back to Muskegon when you were finished with the service?
Actually, Muskegon was the only place I knew. I'd never been any place to live but Muskegon. Muskegon was a small town, and everybody knew everybody, and actually everybody was like brothers and sisters.
Did you know how many blacks lived here in 42? Did you have any idea?
Well, I really don't actually know. Well, it wasn't very many. I'd say, I wouldn't say, it wasn't, in the heights, I wouldn't, I would say it was less than 2,000 people.
That's about what it was. So, when you came back here, when did you come back here?
In December 26th.
What year?
1945.
When you came back here, did you see a lot of blacks here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of blacks. I never seen that many before. Well, I'd seen some in Detroit, but other than in Muskegon, I'd never seen that many blacks.
How had the area changed when you come back? Far as discrimination, far as getting a job, and far as housing was concerned?
Everything. Well, it was, I don't know. I think it was worse when I came back.
Why?
Well, it wasn't too many blacks when I left here, and it wasn't too much of a problem with blacks integrating in different places. But when I came back, I guess it was too many blacks from the South.
Yes.
And there were blacks from the South and whites from the South. And the whites, they brought their tradition here to Muskegon, and they wanted to keep it. And they made things hard for the blacks. And people were restricted buying houses. They wouldn't sell you a house. They would sell you a car, but you couldn't buy a house.
So if you couldn't buy a house, where did blacks live?
From what I seen when I came back, people were living in cardboard boxes. They were living in lean-tos. Some of them was staying in boxcars. They were staying right on a job. And like at Camel's, the boxcars that they ship stuff out, the guys, after they got through work, they just slept in a boxcar in time till it was time to go back to work.
No one ran them out?
Nobody ran them out, because that was the only place for them to stay.
Yeah.
The boxcars were empty when they were getting ready to ship material out. And while they were sitting there, the people slept in there. That is, the workers, you know, because there's so many men that were single and they didn't have families anyway. So they just slept on whatever they had.
Okay, now when you came back in 45, where were the African Americans mainly living?
Mostly was living in the project.
Which is now,
It was called Fairview.
okay, oh, all right. Okay.
Fairview Homes.
Okay, can you tell me something about that?
Well, I really didn't know anything about it. All I know is I came here came back here in the winter, on December 26th, and I really didn't see anybody hardly, but I know there was more blacks here than when I left here. But when the weather got warm, they all came out, these houses. Some of the houses were 2 bedrooms, project. It's about 30 people in the house. And most people that had houses, they converted their houses into sleeping rooms.
I think that's the hotbed thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, this one woman, Amelia Weaver, she ran a hotbed situation where you slept there 8 hours. And that was your bed for 8 hours. And the next person come along with his bed for 8 hours. And the next person.
Do you have any idea how much they paid?
No.
And could they take a bath at the house they stayed? Or they just could
most
sweat?
of them taking a bath at the shop.
Oh,
where they
okay.
worked at, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I imagine some of them didn't take a bath at all.
Did they ever complain about that?
No, I never heard anybody complain, because some of the conditions that they were living in was better than where they lived in the South.
Yes. Did you see African Americans arriving in cars or trucks from the South?
No.
No, you were.
But from top that I know of, that some of these companies, they hired people with trucks and cars to go south and bring people north for the jobs. This one guy, he'd take his truck down south, and anybody would get on the truck, he would bring them back to Muskegon to work in the foundry.
Was that a black guy or?
Black. And same thing with the white. But then after the war was over, they had a problem where there was too many blacks in Muskegon. They wanted to get rid of them. They tried to send them back. When I draw my unemployment check, they asked me, would I go in the back room? And I didn't know what was going on at the time, but they were directing all blacks to the back room. And they asked me, would I be able to farm? Did I know anything about farming? And I told them no. And when they found out that I was from Muskegon, they said they couldn't use me. They were looking for sharecroppers to send back south.
And so, but they didn't just send you back. You had to volunteer to go back. Is that right?
Yeah. They would pay you fair, from what I understood.
Did many of us go back?
I don't recall anybody that went back. I know 2 guys that went back, 2 Mexicans, good friend of mine. You know Santana?
His name is familiar.
He had a hot tamale shop up on
Broadway?
Yeah, on Broadway, and he had it up on Sherman too, on the other side of town.
All right, then now we're at after the war, you're being laid off. What did you do then? And how was Muskegon then?
Well, when I came back from the service,
did you automatically get your job back?
They told me that I could get my job back, but whatever I was qualified at the time of my resume, they had anything for me that fit my resume. And I was qualified as a welder, you know, supervision, and a whole lot of stuff. But anyway, they said there was nothing available. And I wanted to weld, but they told me that there wasn't any openings in welding. So I went back to my old job. And me and the superintendent had a confrontation.
Where was this, at Campbell's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, I punched him out, and they transferred me into the back.
They didn't fire you then?
No. Well, it wasn't my fault. Well, anyway, all the time they were telling me that there wasn't any job openings for welders. I would go to the front office every week, and they tell me the same thing. So when they transferred me into another department, they put the rabbit in the briar patch. I went back there in the heat treat department where they were welding. And they were bringing welders in there every 2-3 weeks because the white guys, they didn't want to be in all that heat.
Yes.
So a few other things happened. So I asked the superintendent about the job of welding. He says, well, I'll give you a job when I get opening. But this went on for 3 years. And every time I say something to him, he'd say that there was not, anyway, I can't say what he said, but one day he brought in 2 guys, and I confronted him about it. I said, when you gonna let me weld? He said, I'm not gonna ever let you weld. I said, why? He wouldn't answer me. I threw my gloves down and I started to the front. So one of the foremen, he says, hey, Emmitt, hey. He said, where you going? I said, somebody gonna tell me something today. I said, I'm gonna turn this place upside down. He said, come here, let me tell you something. He said, it's been a company policy not to hire Negro welders. I said, why didn't he tell me that years ago? So I went on back to my job, and from then on, I was on this case about welding. So we got in a little confrontation back there, and the company president and superintendent, manager, and everybody else come back there to find out what the situation was. And they said, you told him so and so and so and so. I said, yeah, I did say so and so and so, and I will so and so and so. And the company president, he told them that next time they have an opening, to put me in. So when the time came for me to go on, I had to go through a whole lot of stuff. I had to do a whole lot of tests. Now, all they weld was cast iron, but I had to take a test on steel, horizontal, vertical, upside down with steel. And they took it over and tested it out, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it. So the president said, you should hire him next time you get opening. So that's how I got the job of welding.
Now, this was what, in about 46?
This was 50.
50.
50.
Did they have the union in there yet?
The union was in there, but I don't know what was going on.
It was run by the whites?
Yeah, well, white and black.
What were they both
and I couldn't ever get anything out of either one, you know. But it wasn't a closed shop, so the union couldn't do anything. So I was up in the air there, but I finally got the job of welding.
All right. When you got the job in welding, did your life change any?
Not really.
Did you make more money?
I made more money.
And where did you live?
I lived on Main Street.
Were you married then?
No.
No.
I got married about a year after that. And I was married to about 8 years. And then we got a divorce, and I married the woman I got now. We didn't have any kids. But then I married this woman. She had 6 kids. And anybody want to know if I was crazy? But after we got married, we had 4 more. That made 10. And but I accomplished more with her than I did with the one
With no children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, all right, tell me from the period of if you can remember, 1950 to 1960, what was life around you in this area? What was it like in Muskegon? What was it like in the Heights?
I really didn't get around at that period of time because of my wife that I had.
Okay. How were you treated any differently in the plants or on the street during that period? Did things seem to be changing?
No. Everything was the same. Well, like I said, I didn't go anywhere. I never did too much. I was a person that went to football game, basketball game, and that was about
the essence of it.
Yeah, I didn't go to taverns or anything else. My wife and I at that time, we didn't get along too good. And she was real jealous.
Things didn't go along. Did you buy a house during that time?
Yeah.
If I may ask, what did you pay for your
Well, I tried to buy a house before through the bank. Every time I would go, they would tell me I didn't have enough money. I went to all the banks in Muskegon, and they all turned me down. And the realtor, I don't know, I forget his name right now, but his name was Jake. He got me a loan through a direct loan, a GI.
Oh, yes. Was this a white fella?
Right.
Jake was a white, yeah.
Yeah, well, he got a lot of loans that way. For
the GI Bill, yeah.
Right, I tried to get a house, but they wouldn't let me buy a house. And then they had a restricted neighborhood, you know. They had this pact sign every block. The whites had to sign a pact where they would not sell to the blacks. And well, anyway, they showed me houses, but there was always some dilapidated house in some other neighborhood. And I told him, I said, can I find my own house? He said, yeah. So I went down the street, which is on Reynolds. You know where Bernice the hair
You mean
blow.
corner?
Yeah, his niece.
Yeah. Well, they were all they were all in that same area on Reynolds corner, and he had his sister-in-law in the back. Yeah, they were in the back doing hair and selling and candy and things. Was that the place?
No, this is his niece. Her name is Bernice. She does hair.
Yeah, I remember Bernice. She used to do my wife's hair.
I bought the first house in that block. Anyway, I just was going down the street, and this woman was standing out there in the yard, and I asked her, I said, no, my wife, she said, are you going to sell your house? And the woman said, no. She said, but, I forget what she said. But anyway, we struck up a conversation, and I was parked about this far from the curb.
You had a car?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we talked. She was telling all about her experiences and different things about, she lived out west, and the money she had, she got $10,000 here, and she got $10,000 here and there in different places.
She was white?
Yeah. And she sold her place out west, and she got $20,000 from that. Oh, she had a lot of money. Pretty soon the lights, all the lights on the street came on, and the cop came up, and he stopped, and then he took off. He says, "We got a complaint that you were blocking the street." He said, "But I know what's going on," and he took off. So this woman, she said she wasn't going to sell, you know. So we took off and went home. The next day she called us. She said, "You want to buy this house?" My wife said, "Yeah." She said, "I'll sell it to you." She says, "Last night," he said, "all the lights came on." He said they were going around calling each other, said, "Cliffdale is selling to the niggers." And she said that she decided to go on and sell it. She said the reason they don't want to sell because they ain't got no money. She said, "I can buy anywhere I want to buy." So we went over the next day and made agreement to buy the house. And she sold us the house. And that's how we got in that neighborhood.
What year was this?
52, I think. 53.
53.
I think it was 53.
Then when you moved in, how did the neighbors greet you?
Well, they were cold at first, but then after they seen how I kept up the place, and then they wanted to know some information on what I do to my lawn and what did I do this and how I do this, because my place was better than theirs. And the street at that time, at night, the street cleaner would come down. He would go all up and down that block in the next block. When the blacks started moving in the next block, he would stop at that corner and come back.
All right, then where did blacks mainly live? What area during that time?
They were still in the project. From Woodback Street, they were just a few scattered houses up to Hoyt Street, you know, back toward McEdward Street. There were a few scattered places. That's when they were moving in, you know. Before then, they weren't going to sell any black houses no farther than Wood Street. And then a friend of mine, she heard on the conversation on the telephone that they sell to the blacks and get enough for your built-ins and all that stuff. They were plotting.
Now, where did you live before you moved on that street?
I live with my mother-in-law
Oh, okay. And where'd she live?
on Fairfield.
All right.
Waller, D. Waller.
I think I might
He was
have.
a barber.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
He got a son named Lee Waller.
Lee Waller. And was that Velma Johnson?
Right. Velma Johnson was a cousin.
Velma Johnson was one of my first patients.
Yeah. Velma was, she was well, actually my mother-in-law was married to Velma's brother in the South
Oh.
years ago.
But you didn't stay with Velma.
No.
But you stayed around that area.
Next door.
Were you next to the Numbers King? Did you live near him?
Who?
The Numbers King. What was his name?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. He lived on the next street.
He lived on the next street.
Yeah, in Emerson.
Was it? Yeah, he lived on Emerson.
Right.
What was his name? Oh, it's in the books.
I can't call his name.
Oh, I remember his name.
Yeah, his name is in that book there, but something.
Yeah, and it's in the book I got. They wrote about blacks in Muskegon.
Right.
So were there many?
Porter.
Porter Anderson. Yeah, Porter must have been a young man then.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how old he was. I know he never had no decent clothes.
He never had anything.
He never wore anything.
He had a little speakeasy place there too, didn't he?
Yeah, he had everything going over there.
See, I used to make house calls over there to some of the people that were working around there, especially some of the women. And I remember Porter and the others there. So, were mainly blacks living around Fairfield and Emerson, which is west of Seaway Drive?
From Walton, Emerson, in that area.
But they never, we never moved any further then.
No.
The whites kept that area.
Yeah, it was all commercial.
Yes. And it's
now one of my wife's cousins, they own the corner, Henry and Sherman. You know what a little mall is now? The gas station?
Yes.
They own that. And she sold that corner for $31,000. And then she had a cotton club on the next corner.
Did you know anything about the Cotton Club?
No, her name wasn't Battle, but her brother was with the Battle.
Oh, and they were related to Velma.
Right.
The Battles, and he owned the Cotton Club?
Right.
Do you know anything about the Cotton Club?
No.
Do you ever go in there?
Well, once or twice.
Now, what year was that?
That was 52.
Okay. And so blacks had bought all that corner. You know where the AutoZone store is now? On Hendry and Seaway Drive in Sherman. That's
Yeah. Yeah. That was blacks owned all of that.
And they own all of that, huh?
Yeah.
And they
From the
sold.
Seaway, well, actually, from the railroad track back to Henry Street.
Oh. Now, how about the next street going south, which was Broadway? Did blacks live that far?
Back in the 20s.
In the 20s, they lived that far?
Right. A cousin of mine lived there.
And they sold it, and whites made it commercial?
Yeah. My aunt, she, right on the corner of Broadway and Sherman, no, Broadway and Henry, my aunt used to live there.
Oh, then and when it was Broadway to Hendry, there was no Seaway Drive then?
No.
It was just right into Hendry.
Mm-hmm. And I lived on a corner of Sherman and Henry.
What year are we talking?
That was way back in 24.
Oh yeah, that's what I'd like to hear about, yeah.
24. Well, I was a little bump like that, and only thing I know is where my mother would take me, you know.
How did people like Velma and them get here? They didn't come on. How did they get up here in the battles? Because they were all interrelated.
They came here in 37. 36, 37. That's when the foundry started opening up. And like I said, the war effort, whatever, I forget what they call it.
They were helping the British.
Police and all that stuff.
Yes, yes, yes.
They were supplying the Allies, and work started opening up, and people would start buying cars, and a lot of the people from the South came to Muskegon to work in the foundries.
This was before the hotbed episode.
Right, before the hotbed. The hotbed wasn't until after I left here.
Now, when you say when we came here during that period, we were restricted the kind of job we could have, huh?
Yeah, as far as I know. Mm-hmm.
And you had to either do the shakeout or the knockout, or.
Right.
But we still got jobs then, because whites didn't want to do those jobs.
Right. Well, there was a lot of whites that worked on those jobs, Lord, but they were mostly immigrants.
Like the Polish and
Right.
and used people from the Ukrainian and something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of them did the Polish and Hungarians, and so they did them the same way, almost like they did the blacks. So a lot of them couldn't read and write English, and they would cheat them out of their money. They would pay in cash. And the phone would bring your money around, and he just gave you what he figured you needed.
And they didn't know the difference.
They didn't know the difference.
Well, the same thing, there wasn't a lot of blacks that couldn't read and write?
Yeah, a lot of them too.
He did the same thing, huh?
As far as I know of.
Was there any protesting about that?
No. People didn't know anything about protesting.
Yeah. You were just glad to have a job, huh?
Right. I see, I never got any encouragement about going to school or anything. The people, everybody that came from the South, like my family and everybody else's family, they figured that they were almost millionaires in a way because they had a job. And they would, whenever a conversation come up about school, they would say, "You don't need no education, I got a job," you know, because they worked in a foundry, and it was better than what they did in the South. So that was their mentality, you know. They got a job, they made money, and that was just like working in somebody's office now, because they weren't sharecropping whatever they did in the South.
Okay, now how did the people like you, who were born, who spend most of their life in Muskegon, how did the old African-American Muskegonites welcome the blacks from the South?
How was that again?
In other words, what kind of relationship did you have from the southern black people that came here?
Oh, everybody got along okay. I mean, there was no friction or nothing.
You were like brothers and sisters?
Just like brothers and sisters.
Oh.
You had to.
Because you had a common enemy out there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell me about the churches, the African American churches. Do you remember any of them back in the 40s and the 30s?
Well, back when I came here, it was only churches, black churches, was Bethesda and AME Zion.
Was Reverend Jones there when you came here?
No,
Oh,
he didn't come here until the 30s. Him and Reverend Wells came here just about the same time.
The old man, Reverend, the father of the bishop.
Right.
Yeah.
There was only two churches, John Wesley and Bethesda. Like I said, there was no transportation but the streetcar. And we had to walk to church from the heights downtown because there was no transportation, only the streetcar. And by the time you walk from way over there on McHill Street to catch the streetcar on Sam Street, you could be downtown. So my uncle and my aunt, they decided, they started a church in the Heights. My Uncle Miles and my aunt, and they got a few others together, and they used to meet house to house. Then in the summer, they built a spring arbor, a brush arbor. You know what that is?
No.
You take limbs and brush from trees and build them up like that, and then have church underneath.
And that
They call it a brush arbor. You know what an arbor is?
Yes, I know what an arbor is. Would that be their full-time church?
Yeah.
They
Well, yeah. It was just during the summertime.
Okay, what was this church called?
They named it Beulah Baptist Church.
Oh, they were a Baptist church.
Right.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. And
Well, that's still here. Beulah Baptist is still here.
right. And that was the first church. And like I said, during the wintertime, they would meet in different people's house. And once in a while, they would rent a building up in the Heights on Broadway and have church there. So like they have a revival or something, or some preacher come in and make an impression to be the pastor.
Yes.
And that went on until they built a church. They built right there on the same corner that it's not where it's at right now.
Oh, did they build an arbor church on that same corner?
No,
Oh.
it was down farther in the middle of the block.
Okay.
And one of the people next to the lot, she furnished electricity for the lights at night.
And then, in other words, they hooked on.
Yeah.
They had extension.
Extension
Oh,
cord
okay.
and all that. Yeah.
And the people came and worshipped. And
Mm-hmm.
now, do you remember when Christ Temple came here?
Yes. Now that was, well, see, after Beulah got started, got established, then my aunt, she started the Holy Trinity.
What's her name?
Her name was Charity Buchanan.
Charity Buchanan?
Yes. Charity.
Charity?
Yeah. Then she started the church, what they call a sanctified church.
Holiness,
And,
yeah.
now that was integrated. There was just many white and black. Excuse me. Jim Baker this TV evangelist.
He got started there?
Yeah. His grandfather was the one that financed the church, the Holy Trinity. And Charlie Salas, he bought the lot to build a church on.
All right, now, what were the streets like when you first came?
Sherman, it didn't go any farther but no farther than McIlrath Street. Well, from McIlrath to Sherman, to Jarman, you could get down through there if you maneuvered stumps and stuff,
It was dirt
and stumps where people would cut down trees,
This was what year? In the 30s?
In the 20s.
In the 20s, all right.
21, 22, 23. There was no pavement. Sherman was partially paved on the south side of Sherman. There was no streets paved. Peck Street was paved from Sherman to Manahan. Broadway was paved from Reynolds. From Reynolds west. I don't know how far it went. I think it went to Shaw Walker. Shaw Walker. I think that's where they ended up at. And Sherman from from Peck Street back toward the west. I really don't know how far that went.
There was no Seaway Drive or anything. That was the Hendry Street was originally Seaway Drive.
It was no Seaway Drive.
They just
the streets.
Now there was this road coming in from Fruitport when you came in from Grand Rapids.
That didn't exist.
That didn't exist, huh?
No.
So how would you go to Grand Rapids?
You take Apple Avenue.
Oh, okay.
And go through Casanova.
Yeah.
And down through Sparta. And you end up on Alpine.
All right.
You get on Sherman, get on Apple.
Yes.
And you end up on Alpine.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
And if you went any other way, you left here, old Grand Haven Road, go down to Grand Haven, and then cross to Spring Lake.
Then you headed out towards Grand Rapids.
And it was what's now Airline. That was built later. But that was the only way you get to Grand Rapids. And they had a motor train, whatever you call it, interurban. It was a one-coach car that went from Muskegon to Grand Haven, Grand Rapids.
What did that cost?
I don't know. We would catch it, just go to Grand Rapids and catch a train going to other parts of the country. And Grand Trunk left from Peck Street, Peck and Laketon. You remember that? No?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember that because I came in 1960. Mm-hmm. But that went to Grand Rapids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania Railroad. No, Grand Trunk. Pennsylvania Railroad operates from downtown, where the museum is now.
Oh,
the old depot?
Yes.
That's where Pennsylvania operated from.
Did that go to Grand Rapids?
Well, yeah. It went south and east.
So that was your means of transportation, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what it cost to go?
No. I was a little
boy then.
I never rode it. Only time I rode that was when I came back from service on furlough.
Okay, now, what kind of, where did you get your food and what kind of food did you eat back in the 20s and the 30s?
You ate, everybody had a garden. If you didn't have a garden, you'd buy from the peddlers, the street vendors. People come around selling everything.
Were there any black peddlers?
No, there was 2 or 3. They sold pies. As far as I know with them. But there was a woman used to come around and sell fish. She had a horse and wagon.
African American woman?
So it's white.
White.
Mm-hmm. She would sell fish. People would come along and whatever you buy in the store now, people would peddle it on the street.
Very little stores then, huh?
Right. The milkman, he'd come along and sell milk in a book.
Was sanitary dairy here then?
Yeah. Now this one man, he'd sell milk. You pour it in your container. You got a pot, a pan, or whatever. You pour your milk in there.
Like the Iceman, huh?
Yeah, the Iceman.
I remember the Iceman when I was a kid.
Yeah. Now when I was out in Pennsylvania, the man he would bring. No, I was in Virginia at that time. The man would bring around his cow.
Huh?
And you got a jar. You sit there and fill your jar.
This is in Virginia? I never heard that.
Pennsylvania too. That's in the Appalachian.
Oh, you're up there?
In the mountains.
Yeah. Guy bring around his cow.
You work for the company store. You remember that song?
Yes.
You got paid in so much cash and so much script, company money. You could only sell it, spend it at the company store. The company owned everything. Schools, churches. Stores.
Was that here?
That was in Pennsylvania.
How old were you when you were in Pennsylvania?
Oh, I was 5 at that time.
And you remember all that?
Mm-hmm.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, tell me this.
Only thing I don't remember is before we came to Chicago. Now, I remember coming here on the boat, and I remember being in a taxi cab, but I don't know who it was, Chicago or Memphis, but I think it was Chicago. And as far as I go back with my memory.
All right, now here, were there any African American restaurants here when you were young?
No. They had boarding houses. People didn't have a place to stay. They would go eat at these people's house. You know, they'd serve dinner. You'd pay for a meal. Now, this woman that lived on the west side, her name was Miss Scott. And she had a rooming house, and she had this club too. And she would serve dinners in there too. And during the Depression, she ran a soup kitchen. All the people didn't have homes, didn't have food. They would go to her place, and the government would pay her to feed the poor. And They call them soup kitchens.
I remember that.
Hmm.
That way.
Yeah.
Tell me something. How was the Depression around here? You remember that?
It was rough. I mean, like I say, you raise your own food, and there was no money. Whatever you could do, well, I wouldn't know how to say it, but whatever you could scrap up, it was toward your living, you know. Now, down in the area where Sherman is, people would raise a garden down there. And my dad, he raised beans, cabbage, tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever, down in that bottom. And other foods, like fruit and stuff, it almost didn't exist, you know. And meat, you got a chicken because you raised your chicken. And well, few people had hogs in their backyard, and I know a couple families had a couple cows in the backyard. Right here on Muskegon Street, you know, Man Street. What they would do, everybody had a can, 5-gallon can sitting at the back door. And when you get through washing dishes or stems from the collard greens or whatever, you throw it in there, and the man would come along and pick it up and feed his hogs.
They did this too in my hometown. They had a group that did the same thing.
And mostly dishwater because there wasn't nothing to throw away.
Yeah. Now, how did they pay their bills? Like the light bill? Like the...
Well, most of them, you didn't have a light. You had lamps. See, like that lamp on top of this cabinet back here?
Yeah.
That's what we had, lamps. And at nighttime, some people only had one lamp, and you could always tell if somebody go from one room to the other because you see the lamp going.
You know? The light changing.
Yeah. And you would take old iron, heating iron, you wrap that up with towel and stick it in the bed to keep you warm.
That was the hot
because you couldn't afford to burn fire all night. You wrap it up, and that's what kept you warm. And everybody had a privy and a pump where you get your water outside. In the wintertime, and when you wake up in the morning, your windows all frosted, and your water froze, and you had to get a fire started, thaw water out so you can drink.
So they didn't have any indoor plumbing then?
No.
This was in the 30s?
Right.
All right. Then they had mainly outhouses?
Right. Yeah, actually, they didn't start having indoor plumbing here until the war.
Now, did many people own their little piece of land or own their little piece of house?
Well, no, most of them were squatters. People during the Depression, people lost their houses and business and everything else. The people that had houses that wasn't paid for.
Then they just found a piece of vacant land and...
Well, somebody moved out of the house, well, you just move in there.
And no one would charge you rent?
They'd try to collect the rent, but they would rather have you in there and stuff.
How was the police during that time? Were they very brutal or anything?
Well, I didn't know too much about it. All I know is, I remember one man got shot. They were gambling down on McIlroy Street, on Man Street, and the cops came, and he ran, and he went around the corner down by the railroad track. The cops shot at him, and hit him in the heel. It wasn't too much activity. Blacks would always be gambling on the woods. During the Depression, you didn't have anything to do. So the men, they would be out in the bushes gambling, you know. And the cops come along, they see a lot of gang out in the bushes, they know what was going on. And they would break up the game, put them in jail or whatever.
And steal their money.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, they would always raid the black games like that. And then Judge Fox, when he got on the bench, he stopped them. He says, because he said, you don't raid the Lions Club, you don't raid the Kiwanis Club, you don't raid the Eagles Club. He said they gamble all the time. Yeah, but you go out there in the woods and you bust up these games with the black. He said that's the only thing they got to do. That's the only recreation. He said, so leave them alone.
So things begin to change a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Now you say you don't remember much about the Sepia Club or those activities? I said you don't remember much about the Sepia Club and that activities?
No. Well, I never.
Because that was downtown, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I only went there after I came home from service.
Oh, you did work at the Sepia Club?
I went there a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time I went there, I was high on some vodka. We got the green.
Yeah.
Well, I was down at Harmon's house, me and Doc Green and his wife and my cousin. And he was drinking his vodka. And I'm sitting there drinking along with him. And he can put something down, you know. Did you know him well?
Oh, I know, but I knew his reputation.
Yeah, and he drank one of those zombie glasses full. And I drank one. He got another one, I got another one. I went down to Sepia after that. I left him. You know, I had another pint of vodka. And I went in there, and a guy said something to me. I don't know what he said. When I know that I had him in the collar, up against the wall, getting ready to hit him. And then I just come to me, you know. I said, hey, this ain't me. I told my cousin, you take me home. I turned him loose. I quit drinking that vodka.
That kind of cured you then, huh?
Mm-hmm. I was no drinker anyway.
Well, all your years here, what do you think of this area?
Just in here?
Yeah, Muskegon County, and
oh, I think it's a pretty good place from where I've been to other places, you know, comparing. Now, when I was little, we traveled a lot, but I never come in contact with the public. Now, I went to Detroit several times, and when I went there, all the blacks was concentrated down around
the east side
and Brush in that section.
Yeah.
And you go downtown at nighttime, there's people out there all night, you know. It's hot summertime. And I was down in Memphis after the war. And but from what I've seen, Muskegon is a pretty nice place. I mean, people talk about it, but overall, I think it's a good place to live. There's a lot of hidden prejudice, you know.
Well, that's all over the United States.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture that one day we're going to have to dig out of it.
Right.
If we hope to survive. Was there any public transportation like buses and so on?
There was a streetcar
Streetcar.
running from up Sanford Street. That was only public transportation. If you didn't catch the streetcar, you'd have to walk to Muskegon.
Was Muskegon a bigger place than the Heights?
Yes.
And all the happenings were in Muskegon?
All the happenings were in Muskegon. Later years, back in the later 20s, the latter part of the 20s, the early 30s, they had a club on the west side, on the corner of Hume and 8th Street.
This was the African American club?
African American club. It was run by Miss Scott. She had a tavern and she had a rooming house. And the tavern was the only thing that operated. Anything else, it was all speakeasy.
Oh, yes. During the Prohibition time.
Right.
Do you remember if African Americans were involved in the speakeasy?
Practically everybody was involved in the speakeasy, but they just had rent parties.
Oh, yeah.
They would, from McEwer Street back toward Getty was no housings. It was all wooded area, no pavements, no sidewalks, and practically no housing.
Were there bars and things for people to go, or nightclubs or anything there?
There was a pool room, and I'm not sure. It was a club in Muskegon. I think it was down on the bottom of Jefferson Street. I'm not sure.
Was that the sepia? Or was that before the sepia?
That was before the sepia.
All right.
That was back in the 20s.
Uh-huh. So what did, do you remember what the grown-ups did, or were you too young to remember that? I mean, what were black people doing at that time? I mean, do you remember what they did for entertainment, or?
There wasn't any entertainment. Excuse me. It was all just like a rural country, like on a farm. Houses was spar and in between. Only thing that you could do was entertain yourself. Visit families. There was nothing else to do.
Was the railroad? Were there railroads around their tracks?
Yes, railroads. There was Pennsylvania Railroad, Pierre Marquette Railroad, and the Grand Trunk. McEwer Street, and what's now is a 2500 block, 2600 block.
Is there any reason why you stayed in the Heights mainly?
Well, Heights was a new development, and
were there only African Americans there?
No, we weren't the only African Americans. There were several families. African American families were down on McEwer Street and Man Street, which is now the 2000 block. And the other development was on Mains and McElroy Street, which is the 2600 block.
Your number of memory is better than mine. Okay, then after that, you would say you went to, was it Henry Street?
Henry Street.
There. And how old were you then?
I was about 3 years old.
3 years old. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Good for you. And what was, how did you play, and what was the atmosphere with children of that time?
Well, at that time, you did your own thing. There were no playgrounds, nothing for kids to play with. The area, throw a party on Saturday night. They have chitlins, homemade beer, homemade whiskey, and other items to eat. And that would be on a Saturday night. And that was called rent parties. People would make the rent. It was illegal to have whiskey, but bootlegging was at its height at that time. A friend of mine that I knew, I didn't know her, but she was with the family when we were in Arkansas. She used to give Friday night parties for the police department. They let her operate illegally because she catered to the police on a Friday night until she got busted by the feds, and she went to prison for 2 years.
For serving alcohol?
For serving alcohol. Her name was Amelia Weaver.
Now, let me ask you this. How much did they charge in these rent parties? Do you remember?
That I don't know. That I don't know. Well, I was usually there at the time. My aunt, she was into it a big way. And one thing I recollect was she had a party. I was 3 years old. And she gave me some homemade whiskey.
Tell me how you first came here in Muskegon.
Well, I came here from Humanoak, Arkansas in 1921. We came to Muskegon by way of Memphis, Tennessee, and Chicago. At the time when I was in Chicago, the children were having rickets, and my mother, thought maybe I might have caught the rickets. And we moved, she decided to come to Muskegon. I had an uncle here, and an aunt, 2 aunts, and 3 uncles. We came here on a boat. That was, at the time they didn't have any buses. You either came here on a train or you came here on a boat. And the boat was SS Alabama.
And then after you came here, where did you first live?
We first lived with a family on Park Street. Right now it's a temple of a Muslim church.
All right, and how long did you stay there? And how old were you then?
I was 18 months old. We stayed there for about a month. Then we moved with my uncle on 8th Street, on the corner of 8th and Hovey. And from there we moved to Henry Street, the corner of Henry and Sherman. Then after that we moved to